You clicked because you saw 10 inches and Jon Rahm's name, and you already suspected it was the setup, not the swing. Good, because you were right. I found the thing that lets a golfer with a backswing shorter than yours hit it past you. It is not fitness. It is not a new driver. It is a 10-inch adjustment he makes before the club ever moves. Here is what I am claiming, and I know how it sounds. You can take 5 strokes off your score this month without changing your swing at all. You change where your body sits over the ball. That is it. And the reason nobody told you is that this exact setup was written down decades before Rahm was born, then quietly buried under 1,000 paid lessons. I traced it to a single page in a book from 1957. I will give you the page, the name, and the measurement before this is over. And I promise you this works in the garage you already have, with the clubs already in your bag tonight. Let me tell you how I stumbled into it, because I was not looking for Jon Rahm at all. It started on a driving range in the middle of winter, the kind of cold where the mats are half frozen and only the stubborn people show up. There was an older man 3 stalls down, slow, heavy in the hips. His backswing barely reached parallel, and he was flushing his 3-wood pass kids half his age who were swinging out of their shoes. I watched him for 20 minutes. I could not figure out what he was doing differently, because during the swing he was doing nothing special. So I stopped watching his swing. I started watching what he did before it, and that changed everything. He set up to the ball the same way every single time, with a little ritual. He would set his feet, then he would sink down and back like he was about to sit on a tall stool, and there was a gap, a visible gap between his hands and his thighs. Same gap every ball. When he finally packed up, I did the thing you are not supposed to do to a stranger. I asked him. He laughed and said one sentence I have not been able to shake since. He said, "Son, I don't hit the ball with my swing. I hit it with my setup. Learned it from a book older than you." He would not tell me the book. He just smiled and walked to his car. So I had a mystery, a frozen range, a slow man out driving the young, and a book he would not name. And the only clue I had was that gap between his hands and his legs. 10 inches, give or take. I went home and I started digging, and what I found was not one man's trick. It was a whole system of setup that used to be taught to every beginner, and then got replaced by something that keeps you paying. Let me show you what I mean about being replaced, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. Go and watch how golf gets taught today. Almost every lesson, every video, every app is about the swing, the takeaway, the top, the transition, the release, positions, positions, positions. There is a reason for that, and the reason is not that positions are the fastest way to help you. The reason is that the swing is complicated enough to sell you lessons forever. You can chase swing positions for the rest of your life and always need one more session, one more drill, one more subscription. The setup cannot be sold that way, because once you know it, you know it. You do not need me again. Nobody builds a business on a fix you only have to learn once. Therefore, the setup got quiet. It got shoved into the first 2 minutes of a beginner clinic and never mentioned again. And the strange thing, the thing that started to make me angry as I dug, is that the old teachers knew the setup was where the strokes lived. They said it plainly. We just stopped listening. Here is the first hard evidence I found. Ben Hogan, 1957, a book called 5 Lessons, The Modern Fundamentals of Golf. Most golfers have heard of it. Almost none have read it closely. Hogan spends the first 2 chapters before he ever describes the swing on the grip and the setup. He says something that stopped me cold. He wrote that a golfer with a correct setup has a good chance of hitting a decent shot even with a mediocre swing, while a golfer with a poor setup can make a perfect swing and still hit a poor shot. Read that again. The best ball striker who ever lived told you the swing matters less than where you stand. And we buried it. But Hogan gave me only half the picture, because Hogan was a wiry, athletic man, and what I needed was proof this worked for a regular body. So I kept pulling the thread, and the thread led me somewhere older and stranger and much more specific about that 10-inch gap. Before I give you the older source, let me make the 10 inches real for you, because a number without a picture is useless. I want you to stand up right now, wherever you are, and pretend to hold a club. Most amateurs I watch do one of two things at address. They either stand too tall and reach for the ball so their arms are almost straight out from their chest, or they crowd it, hunched, with their hands jammed right up against their thighs. Both of those are killing you, and here is why. When your hands are jammed against your body, you have no room. The club has nowhere to travel except up and around, steep and outside, and you come over the top and slice. When your arms are reaching straight out, you are pulled off balance toward the ball, your weight goes into your toes, and you lose all the power that comes from the ground. The 10-inch adjustment fixes both at once. You set your hands so the butt end of the grip hangs roughly 10 inches from your thighs. For most adults, that is about one hand length plus a fist, give or take, measured from the top of the grip to the front of your leg. Your arms hang down, relaxed, from your shoulders, not reaching, not crowding, hanging with room underneath. That gap does something you can feel immediately. It puts your weight back into the middle of your feet, into your arches, off your toes. It gives the club a slot to swing down into from the inside, and it stacks your arms under your shoulders so the big muscles do the work instead of your hands and wrists flipping at the ball. When I first set this gap on that frozen range in my own stance, the very next swing felt slower and lazier, and the ball came off harder. That is the tell. When effort goes down and distance goes up, you have found something real. Now here is where the mystery deepened, because that 10-inch gap alone is only one piece of what Rahm does. And when I lined up Rahm's setup next to the old book photographs, I saw the second piece, and it explained his short swing entirely. Let me jump back to the research, because this is the clue that reframed the whole case. I had been treating Rahm's short backswing as a limitation he overcomes. That is backward. His short backswing is a result. It is what happens automatically when you get the setup right. I found this by going further back than Hogan to a book from 1946 by an Englishman named Percy Boomer called On Learning Golf. Boomer taught golf in France between the wars to some of the best players in Europe, and he wrote one line that connected every dot. He said, "You should feel, at address, that you are sitting into the shot with your hands hanging, and that the swing should be controlled by the feeling of the body turning inside a barrel, not by the arms lifting." Boomer called it swinging in a barrel. The arms do not go up. The body turns, and the arms stay low and connected. Here is why that produces a short swing that hits it long. When your setup gives your arms room to hang and your weight sits in the middle of your feet, your body can turn deep and load against the ground. The power comes from that coil and from the ground pushing back. The arms do not need to fly up to parallel to make speed, because the speed is not coming from the arms. So the swing looks short, it looks lazy, and it crushes the ball. That is Jon Rahm exactly. His hands barely go past his trail shoulder at the top, and he is one of the longest, most consistent drivers in the professional game. He is not fighting his short swing. His setup made the long swing unnecessary. Therefore, the 10 inches is not just the gap at the hands, it is a whole seated, grounded, room-to-hang position that makes a compact swing powerful. But there was still a hole in my story, and it is probably the same hole in your head right now. If this was written down in 1946 and 1957, in plain language, in famous books, how on earth did it disappear? That question is where I found the villain. And it is not a person. It is a business model. But before I walk you through what actually happened to this knowledge, I want to point you towards something I put together for exactly this moment. I spent a long time digging through these old sources, running down every measurement and every drill, and I collected the whole system into a series of digital books called First Fix, Deep Fixes, and System Complete. They are not long, they are not padded, They go straight to the setup foundations that disappeared from modern instruction, with the exact drills and reference points from the original sources in the order that actually produces results. If you want the full trail in one place rather than piecing it together yourself, the books are linked in the description. Now let me walk you through what actually happened to this knowledge, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. In the old days, before television and before the modern teaching industry, golf instruction was passed from a club professional to a member in person over years. That professional had one job. He wanted you to become a good player at his club so you stayed a happy member. He was not selling you a product. He taught you the setup first because the setup gave you the fastest improvement, and a happy improving member was the whole point. So the setup got taught properly up front as the foundation. Then two things changed. First, video and mass instruction arrived, and the whole industry discovered that the swing, sliced into dozens of tiny positions, could be sold endlessly. Every position is a new tip. Every tip is a new lesson, a new video, a new gadget. The setup, which you learn once, was terrible for that business. So it got compressed into a throwaway line at the start of every lesson, and all the attention, all the money went to the moving parts. Second, the equipment industry got enormous. And a golfer who slices and comes over the top because his setup crowds the ball is a golfer who will buy a new anti-slice driver every single year, chasing with his wallet what he could fix for free with his feet. I am not saying anyone sat in a room and plotted to hide the setup. I am saying that the incentives all pointed one direction, and the direction was away from the free permanent fix and toward the endless paid one. The setup did not get banned. It got starved of attention until it looked too simple to matter, and a fix that looks too simple to matter is the easiest thing in the world to bury in plain sight. But here is what the industry did not count on, and this is the part I love. The knowledge never actually died. It survived in the old books, on the shelves, and in the hands of a few stubborn old players like the man on the frozen range. It was preserved, and once you know where to look, you can trace it right up to the best players alive today who are doing exactly what Boomer and Hogan described, whether they know the names or not. Now let me get to the part that matters most to you, because I know what you are thinking. You are thinking this is fine for people with a home simulator, or money for lessons, or a body that still bends the way it used to. So let me stop you there, because this is the whole reason I made this for you specifically. You do not need any of that. You do not need a range membership. You do not need a launch monitor. You do not need to be flexible or young or strong. Everything I am about to give you, you can rehearse in your living room tonight in your socks with one club, and it will transfer straight to the course. This is the part the paid world cannot charge you for, so let me hand it to you completely. Here is the first drill, and it costs nothing. Stand in front of a mirror or a dark window at night, facing sideways so you can see your profile. Take your normal club and take your normal address. Now look at the gap between the grip end and your thighs. I want you to physically set that gap to about the width of one open hand plus a fist. Push your hips back like you are about to sit onto a bar stool that is a little too far behind you. Let your arms hang straight down from your shoulders until they are soft, not reaching, not touching your legs. Feel your weight settle into the middle of your feet, into your arches. That is the position. Hold it for 10 seconds and memorize how it feels. Do that 10 times tonight. You are not swinging. You are burning the feeling of the gap into your body so it shows up automatically on the course. Here is the second drill, and it fixes your weight, which is where most amateurs lose their power. Standing in that same setup, I want you to feel like you could tap your toes up off the floor and not fall forward. If you cannot lift your toes without tipping toward the ball, your weight is too far forward and you are draining power into the ground in front of you. Rock back until you find the spot where your toes feel light and your heels feel planted. That is the grounded, seated feel that lets your body turn and push. Rahm has it, the old man on the range had it. Now you have the drill for it. Here's the third piece, and it is the one that makes the short swing work. In that setup, I want you to turn back slowly and feel your belt buckle turn while your arms stay low and quiet. Do not lift your arms. Turn your body and let your arms come along for the ride, staying in front of your chest. When your shoulders have turned as far as they comfortably go, stop. That is your top. It might feel absurdly short. It might feel like you have barely gone anywhere. Good, that is the Rahm feeling. Now turn through the same way, belt buckle to the target. You just made a compact, connected, powerful swing, and you did it in your living room with no ball and no cost. Do those three things for 1 week, 10 minutes a night, and I will tell you what happens. Because it happened to me and to everyone I have handed this to. The first time you go back to the course, you will feel like you are not trying hard enough. The swing will feel too short and too easy, and the ball will fly off the face with a sound you have not heard from your own clubs in years. Slower effort, better contact, more distance. That is the whole promise, and it costs you nothing but 10 minutes a night. But I told you at the start there was a final piece, a single page from 1957 with an exact measurement, and I have not given it to you yet. That is because it took me the longest to run down, and it is the piece that ties the 10 inches to the ground and turns a decent setup into a powerful one. Let me give it to you now. This is the part that clicked everything into place for me. I kept going back to Hogan's 5 lessons because I felt like I was missing something in the setup chapter. And on the pages about the stance and posture, Hogan does something almost nobody talks about. He does not just say bend over the ball. He describes the exact relationship between the width of your stance, the angle of your knees, and the position of your head behind the ball. And there is a detail buried there about the trail foot and how the weight should feel loaded into the inside of the trail leg, ready to push. I read it a dozen times before it landed. The 10-inch gap at the hands is the doorway, but the power comes from loading the inside of the trail leg and pushing off the ground through impact. Hogan drew it. Boomer felt it in his barrel. And Rahm, if you watch him in slow motion, does exactly this. He sets the gap, he loads into the inside of his trail leg, and he shoves off the ground so hard his trail heel fires up off the turf through the ball. Here is the thing that made me sit back in my chair. I went looking for modern proof, and I found it in force plate studies, the kind of research where they put golfers on pads that measure how much force the feet put into the ground. The data showed that the longest hitters are not the ones with the fastest arms. They are the ones who push into the ground the hardest and at the right moment, generating what the researchers measured as well over their own body weight in vertical force through impact. Some of the elite players pushed into the ground with force equal to more than twice their body weight, and you cannot push into the ground like that if your setup has your weight out on your toes and your hands jammed against your legs. You can only do it from the seated, grounded, hands-hanging position that Hogan drew in 1957 and Boomer described in 1946. So here is the finale, the whole case in one motion, and I want you to do this exact sequence this weekend. Set the 10-inch gap between your grip and your thighs. Sit back until your toes go light and your weight settles into your arches. Feel your weight load into the inside of your trail leg, the inside of that back foot, like it is a spring. Turn your body back short and quiet with your arms hanging, and then coming down, push off the ground with that trail leg and turn through. That is the 10-inch setup adjustment plus the ground push that it unlocks. That is Jon Rahm's power in a form your body can copy tonight. And it came from a page written the year the first satellite went into orbit, sitting on library shelves the whole time. While the world sold you drivers, I tested this against my own numbers before I would put my name near it. My driver carry had been stuck for 3 years. I set the gap, loaded the inside of my trail foot, shortened my backswing until it felt lazy, and pushed off the ground. In 2 weeks of 10-minute living room sessions, I picked up real distance, and, more importantly, I stopped losing balls to the right. The slice that had cost me 2 or 3 strokes around for years came from crowding the ball and coming over the top. The gap gave the club room to come from the inside. The ground push gave me speed I was never using. 5 strokes was not a marketing number. 5 strokes was what I actually saved, mostly by stopping the disasters, not by any miracle. And that is what I want you to take from all of this, more than any single drill. The thing you were told was complicated was simple all along. The strokes you have been chasing with new clubs and new lessons were sitting in your setup in a 10-inch gap and a grounded trail leg, written plainly in books by the best players who ever lived, and then buried under an industry that could not make money selling you something you only had to learn once. You did not fail to improve because you lacked talent. You failed to improve because the cheapest, most powerful part of the game was the one part nobody kept pointing you toward. I feel like I got something back that was quietly taken from me, and now I have handed it to you. You are the kind of person who wanted the whole trail, not just the headline, or you would have clicked away 10 minutes ago. So let me ask you something specific, and I want you to actually answer it in the comments, because this audience never speaks up unless I ask directly, and I am asking directly. When you set that 10-inch gap between your hands and your thighs tonight, and you take that first slow, short, lazy swing, tell me what the ball sounded like coming off the face. Tell me if it felt too easy. I read every one of those, and that specific comment tells me the setup landed and you felt it. If you want the rest of this trail, follow along, because this is not a channel. It is a small group of us digging the free, permanent fixes back out from under everything they sell us. Next time I am chasing down the old putting setup that a 1920s champion used to never 3-putt, the one thing about his eyes and the ball that modern putting instruction completely dropped. It is stranger than the 10 inches, and I have almost got the whole thing pieced together. Stick with me, set the gap this weekend, and go hit it past the young guys. Before you go, if this video helped, there's a deeper version waiting for our members. You can ask me your own question and a real person answers, and you'll be among thousands of folks just like you. Point your phone's camera at the code on screen. It takes less than a minute and you can cancel anytime, no risk.